If you know me at all, you probably know me as Muller, She Wrote, or AG on social media. I host the Daily Beans podcast, the Unjustified, every podcast ever I host. You might see me on Stuff Miller, and I am a community member here. And so I just want to thank everybody, because if you listen to the show, you know that everybody I talked to on the show, and I spoke to Randy Weingarten, we talked about how the most important thing to resist authoritarianism and oligarchs is community. We talked about how the reason Florida is trying to take away vaccine mandates for school children is to keep people away from schools because fascists hate teachers. Fascists hate critical thinking, and they hate when we hang out together in our communities. It's very dangerous for them. They want to isolate us. They want to keep us from talking to one another and scheming to push back on, I don't know, masked agents in unmarked vans kidnapping our community members, for example. So just being here is a huge act of resistance, and I'm so very proud to be part of this particular event tonight. So thank you again. I also want to thank Murakai for hosting this, and the Mona Forqueta family. I think we're going to do and have some really great conversations here, because if you're like me, I'm at home and I'm like, I feel very helpless. What can I do? What can I do? I need concrete, tangible things, no matter how small, even if it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. For example, I filed a lawsuit because I want to get at the training videos that trained and instructed FBI personnel on how to find and flag Donald Trump's name in the Epstein files. So I'm suing for that. I'm suing. I should say my lawyers at the incredible doing the pro bono work, because it's a lot of work, at National Security Counselors, Kelma Flanagan. I'm suing for Doge emails because I want the government to admit that they are subject to the Freedom of Information Act, and they can't hide up in the executive office of the president. So these tiny things, saying what can we do? So we come together as a community and talk about what we can do. And tonight, we're going to be joined by some amazing council members. Sean Elo Rivera and Monica Montgomery Sept are here tonight. And they'll be fielding your questions. And we're going to talk about what we can do. And you have asked your questions on index cards, put them in a bowl back there. They're going to come up here to me at some point, and we're going to be directly answering your questions. What I would ask, first of all, some housekeeping things. I want to welcome the organizers, Caleb Rainey, Peter Holmes, Lucas Volk, Sylvia Code, Laura Farmer-Sherman, Kristen Lusek, Lisa Rosenfeld, and the Working Families Party. I want to thank all of them. The mission of this event is to provide a supportive space where we all can learn, connect, and plan future actions, right? I'm thinking of, what is that movie, Practical Magic, with the phone tree? We're going to activate the phone tree. Okay. Even if I am a witch, it's fine. Don't be scared. Also, some housekeeping. Restrooms are over here. Bar is back there. And we ask for respectful engagement. There's a way to do it, and I think we're all familiar with that way. So thank you for that. And we have handed out cards that you can raise and wave when you agree with something. I also don't mind a woohoo or a clap. Some of us are having a glass of wine and you don't want to spill it, wave your card, that's what that's for. I want to enact this at comedy shows and live podcasts so that people can drink it and cheer at the same time. So without further ado, and I just want to let you know, Monica is at City Hall right now doing some work. And she will probably be a little bit late, but she will be here. But in the meantime, we do have a council member from District 9. Please welcome Sean Elo Rivera. Good to see you, sir. I got your glass of water. And thank you to the person who gifted me this shirt. It says, "Drink tequila straight, fuck ice." try to keep it to a minimum tonight. This is a family event, but sometimes, especially gestures broadly, it's appropriate. So thank you so much for being here and being willing to talk to the community members. Tell everybody about your district and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. First of all, thank you for having me. Thank you to the organizers. And thank you all for showing up. This is incredibly important for all the reasons that Allison said. We can only win when we come together as a community. Only win by coming together as a community. And nights like tonight help us do that. So again, my name is Shawnee Rivera, and I'm very proud to represent San Diego's 9th Council District. The 9th Council District is, in my admittedly biased opinion, I won't say the best council district in the city, but I do think that it actually is the best representation of the city. And that's because of its diversity. It is an incredibly diverse district in every way imaginable. From socioeconomic conditions, we have communities like Alvarado Estates and Kensington and Talmadge in our district. We also have Stockton and Mount Hope and City Heights in our district, and Normal Heights, the college area, Mission Valley East. It is very, very diverse in terms of income. It's also very diverse in terms of race and ethnicity and documentation status and national origin. It's why I love the district so much. I came to San Diego to attend law school, and in my first legal internship, I worked at something called the City Heights Community Law Project, which was based at 3 schools in City Heights, an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school. And I immediately fell in love with the City Heights community because of its diversity. I come from a multi-ethnic and multi-religious family myself. My mom is Central American. My dad is Jewish with Ashkenazi and Sephardic roots. I have my mom's sister, my Tia, has converted to Islam, and so I have Persian cousins. Everyone is my family. And I know that diversity is hard sometimes. There's some loud conversations. But it's an amazing thing when it works. And seeing people who have these differences unite in common purpose really is a beautiful thing to see. And I saw that in City Heights. So it drew me in to continue working in City Heights. I worked at a nonprofit based in City Heights after law school. I obviously ran to represent the community, and it's been an amazing, amazing experience. It's also a community that is very, very much being impacted and has been impacted by, and I thank you for calling it what it is, by the fascist, racist, authoritarian regime that is the Trump administration.
Thank you for coming, everyone. I'm a loud mouth podcaster. You represent us, so thank you for using the words. I think everybody probably appreciates that because I feel like corporate media is somehow trying to dumb this down and make us think that there's bad things on both sides, and it's the most ridiculous. We could talk for hours about that, but
Allison, can I just very quickly speak to that? Down the street, when the ice raid happened, I was outraged. And I was not just outraged over what I saw that night, but what had been going on in the city, in the country, in my community. I was like simmering. And I was simmering before I saw that, and what I saw brought me to a boil. And I was simmering because I'd seen a dad ripped out of his car in front of his kids, dropping off his kids to school in City Heights. I was simmering because of what's been going on in our courthouses, where people who are quite literally trying to follow the legal process are having the rug pulled out from under them during that process and being ripped away from their families. And that had me in this simmering state for months. And what I saw there, and those images, brought me to a boil. And when I called the ICE agents terrorists, and I called the ICE agents terrorists because I truly, truly believe then and believe now that their intent, it meets the definition of terrorism. They are there to scare us. They are there to intimidate us. They are there to achieve a political objective. And when I did that, the both sides of that moment was outrageous to me. as if me saying the word terrorist is on equal footing as armed, masked men raiding a restaurant during the busiest night of the week in one of the most popular restaurants in the community. We can't let that slide. And so thank you for calling things what they are, and I encourage everyone to use the words that actually apply to the situation we're in. There is no time to bullshit around the truth.
100%. And, you know, as a Navy veteran, shocker, a Navy veteran in San Diego. That's why that San Diego airport doesn't let us go on first, because everyone's a veteran. But on a serious note, as a military sexual assault survivor, I often compare the assaults from ICE onto that kind of an assault on my body, and I always think of, you know, when I try to fight back against something like that, and people both sizing you for calling them terrorists would be akin to if somebody sexually assaults me and I punch them, that somehow we are both assaulting each other. It's like what Texas is doing by diluting the votes of black and brown people, and California is responding. It's not the same. It's a response, it's a self-defense, it's punching back. And I think that that's such an important distinction, and I'm glad that you made it. Talk a little bit about, we're going to get into some more questions. I'm also want to talk to you before Monica gets here about some of the work you've done, especially Raise the Wage. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, first, Allison, thank you for sharing your story, and I appreciate that. Yeah, so, you know, there is a lot of work that we're doing in the city, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more. There is the resistance work that is happening right now, but I will share with you that I am very much trying to distance myself from the word and the concept of resistance being the sole thing that we are doing. And I think that's important for a couple of reasons. One, I was in organizing and movement spaces during Trump 1.0, which was the beginning of the resistance, right? And we used that word, and it was important. And resistance certainly is an important thing to do, but I think it also sells us short in multiple ways. And to resist something is to simply say you're not going to move forward. And sometimes I never practice law, but I can't beat the lawyer out of my brain completely. And I try to really think about the words that we're using. And I don't want to just resist Donald Trump. I want to protect my community. Because I think protection is a very different thing. I protect the things and the people who matter most to me. And the energy that I protect something with is very different than the energy that I resist something with. The protection, that energy, that is fierce. That is deep, it is visceral, and I would say it is one of the most, the protection, the energy we use when we protect something that we love or someone that we love, that is the most powerful forces that we see, not just in human beings, but in nature. The mama bear, right? She's protecting her cubs, right? And that sort of energy is what I think we need to show up with. And so, and there's more too in terms of the future we're trying to build, and I know we'll get to that. I'll talk more about that later. But a lot of what I'm trying to think about in terms of my role as a council member right now is how we protect community. And we have to protect community not just from Trump, but from the many of the forces that have been making life incredibly challenging and sometimes unlivable for people right here in San Diego for way too long. And a lot of those same forces are associated with or were supporters of Trump. Corporate entities and billionaires and multimillionaires who do not give a damn about the well-being of San Diegans and have seen this city as a place to suck as much wealth out as possible and have made life very, very difficult for San Diegans as a result. And so we're pushing that hard against that. And we've done a few different things on that front. One has been to strengthen tenant protections. The second, which is associated with that, is to ban the use of AI technology to rig the rents of San Diegans. That is a thing that was happening and is no longer legal in San Diego because we passed policy to ban that. The biggest corporate landlords in the world were banding together to use AI technology to rig rents. Artificially jacking up rents in San Diego, per their data, up to 8%, which is hundreds of dollars per year. We banned that practice. Overcame the resistance from those corporate landlords and the tech companies to win that fight. And we're engaged in a big fight right now to raise the wage for tourism workers. And that item will come to City Council next week. And I think there's been some deceptive text messages that have gone out to the community telling you that this is going to raise the cost of living here in San Diego, that it's going to make restaurants like this one pay more, and that's not true. They're not part of this ordinance. What we are simply asking is these large hotels, not the small, locally owned ones, but the large hotels in San Diego, to pay their workers a wage that will give them a fighting chance to afford to live in this city. These are people who on a regular basis, a quarterly basis, in fact, talk to their shareholders about just how much money they are making, about how optimistic they are about the tourism industry, especially here in San Diego. And then when their workers ask for a decent wage, they cry poverty. They tell people who can barely afford to live in this city, many who have been forced to move across the border in order to avoid homelessness, despite having full-time jobs, that they can't afford to pay them more. And we don't believe that that is true. And so, for a long time, I think San Diego has had the wrong notion about tourism. That San Diego's had this idea that we owe the tourism industry something. And I think that's flipped on its head. They owe us. They owe San Diego for the privilege of doing business in one of the greatest tourism destinations in the country. And what they owe us for that is nothing more than to pay their fair share of taxes and to pay their workers a living wage. So that's what we're demanding. We're going to bring an ordinance forward next week to make them do that. They are fighting tooth and nail. They've already put $1.5 million into a committee to oppose us and to potentially referendize this, which tells us everything we need to know. It's not about not having the money, it's about power. And this is where the correlation between them and Trump comes in. We've watched the tech tycoons lick the boots of Donald Trump, bow to him, because they want to protect their money. These are the companies that own the mega hotels here in San Diego. It's a lot of the same players. And we can't let them win. So on the local front, when we talk about protecting community, it means giving people the dignity of a fair wage and asking these multi-billion-dollar global corporations to foot the bill. Again, not for anything extravagant, but simply enough for people for hard-working people, keep a roof over their head and feed their kids.
Awesome. It's so true. These giant, massive corporations, they're capitalists when they're profiting and they're socialists when they're not. It's kind of amazing how that works.
Just the last point on that, because this one matters. It really matters what they say to their shareholders during those earnings reports. That is the one time where they actually have a legal obligation to paint something close to the truth. The rest of the time they are free to lie, and they lie and lie and lie and lie. But every time they go on the record, and SeaWorld is included in this ordinance as well, a multi-billion-dollar global corporation that stiffed the city of San Diego $10 million in lease payments because they could. Crying poverty, and then once again, when it comes time to talk to their shareholders, business has never been better. We're opening water parks in Abu Dhabi, but we can't pay the rent in San Diego or our workers a fair wage.
Yeah, pretty incredible talking out of one side of their mouth, and then it's kind of like when Trump's in court versus when he's talking to the public. I think that is such a good illustration, the stopping the rent fixing by the use of artificial intelligence. That's such an important example of local politics working for the people. We know Kamala Harris, when she was running, she wanted to pass a law nationally that banned that practice. And then you gotta get Congress, and you gotta get the Senate, and you gotta get probably John Fetterman to agree to something, or at least show up, and then you gotta finagle things, and then give away some other things, and a lot of compromise with the way the sausage is made. But here, locally, these are the kinds of ordinances that you can pass, impact us directly in the community. So thank you for bringing that up. And I think to go back to talking about the importance of community, because you were talking about not just resisting, but protecting. And I think that that's really an important distinction to make, and it reminded me of, there's a professor of history named Jelani Cobb, and I saw him talking. I mention him on my show all the time. If you listen to my show, you're probably like, oh, here she goes with Jelani Cobb again. But he said something really amazing to Chris Hayes on his show. He brought up the fact, the power of community, of us just being here tonight. And he said, with regard to the ICE raids, he said, when I teach my students about the Fugitive Slave Act, I tell them, these people were coming into people's communities and snatching people, kidnapping people, and taking them out of their communities. And the people fought back. And he said, my students always ask me, oh, so the abolitionists fought back. It was the abolitionists. And Professor Cobb said, no, it was everybody. And he said this, and I'll never forget this, because the fundamental civic unit in our nation is neighbor.
Yes.
And so when I saw the response to what happened here in South Park, that it just like rang a bell in me, like it did for you, and like it does for anybody. And it doesn't matter, where we come from or who we vote for. I mean that matters, but it doesn't. In these instances, we're all enraged by tearing apart our communities. And so, I'd like to ask you, and I know we're going to ask Monica when she gets here, to talk a little bit more about that, about concrete things. We have our Know Our Rights cards, and we know we can film ICE agents, and we can yell fascist at them and tell them to take off their masks because they're giant chickens. I use a different word. But what are some other things, politically maybe, that we as community members can do to support our council members and our supervisors to push back against these raids?
Thank you for asking that. I will definitely talk about political piece in a second, but I cannot emphasize this, and if I said it at the beginning, I will say it multiple times. The neighbor piece, the community piece is incredibly important. Because what we are actually going to need to get, to not just protect folks, but to get through this and build a better future, is a much tighter knit community than I think we have right now. I think we have the potential for it, but I'm not sure we're fully there. And let me kind of talk about the standard that I think we need to aim for in terms of the community that we want to build. I talked about the story of the father who was ripped out of his car in front of his kids. And we know that there's community members right now, and let's be 100% clear about this. This has been true since the beginning of this administration, and it is especially true now, after yesterday's atrocious Supreme Court ruling. This doesn't actually, what I'm saying right now does not only apply to people who are not citizens. What the Supreme Court said yesterday is that once the regime determines broadly what articulable facts might look like to detain someone who might be committing a crime, it's fair game. But I'll use the example in City Heights. His dad is ripped out of his car, he's taken away in front of his kids. And that doesn't just mean that dad can't go to work that day or the next day. There's a whole ripple effect in terms of the community. And we need to be in a place where we can take care of one another in those times. And the community that we need to build is one where we trust one another with the people who we most love, the people we most want to protect. And I get emotional every single time I think about this, but I think it is the standard that we need to aim for. There are, how type of community do we need to create where I can look at you as my neighbor and trust you with my kids, with my parents, with the people I love most, if I don't come home that day? If we can just take a moment to think about that. If you did not know you were going to come home from work, what sort of relationship will you need to have built with your neighbors to feel okay with, not feel okay, but to trust that your kids will be okay? So it all starts there, because we're going to need that sort of solidarity to get through this moment. But also, when we've built that sort of solidarity, those sort of relationships with one another, our opportunity to build power is that much greater. And I'll pivot now to the political piece. And I'm going to talk more like an organizer than a city council member if I can. Everything that we do politically right now needs to be about building and winning power. I really need folks to digest that and hold that and commit to that. Because Trump cannot be trusted with power. And the Congress that we have right now cannot be trusted to be a check on that power. And the Supreme Court clearly refuses to be a check on that power. In other words, we have to have power. And we have some power at the local level, we have some power at the state level, and we need to exercise that. We need to exercise that unabashedly, fearlessly, and we have to win power at the federal level. So I just want everyone to be laser focused on that, on that piece of winning power. We have to pass Prop 50. That has to happen. And we need to take measures at the local level to do the best we can to protect people in the moment that we're in. And if I can share a policy that we'll be bringing forward soon. Later this week, in July, I announced that we will be bringing a policy forward this month to take measures to protect folks, to protect our community members, and not just people who are not documented, all of us. And on Friday, we'll be standing with a coalition of regional leaders to announce the policy proposal that not just the city of San Diego will be bringing forward, that we're trying to do in unison with other cities across the region. And what this policy would do is a few different things. The first would be, would create some limitations and restrictions around the sort of information that government asks residents and visitors to the city to provide. We know that the Trump administration cannot be trusted with information. They've breached protocols that existed for decades in terms of IRS sharing with ICE, medical records not being immune from being used for enforcement purposes. So we need to be very thoughtful about what data we're collecting, why we're asking for it. We need to ensure that the protections, so California has established, I think, a very good framework in SB 54, the California Values Act, in terms of not coordinating with federal enforcement agents when it comes to immigration. But we need to take that a step further, and we need to take Trump and Project 2025 at its word in terms of what they want to do and who they want to target, and start applying those protections to as many people as possible. So we know that the LGBT community is in the crosshairs of the Trump administration. We know that women are in the crosshairs of the Trump administration. We know that people who seek reproductive health care are in the crosshairs of the Trump administration. We know people who have the audacity to speak out against the fascism that we're seeing are in the crosshairs of the Trump administration. And so we are going to establish protections similar to SB 54 for people based on political speech, on race, on ethnicity, on healthcare history, on all of the things that we know Trump intends to attack people for. and we will not allow the San Diego to coordinate with federal law enforcement for those purposes. We want to take it a step further than that. Well, yes, we know people of different religions. Well, that certainly, yes. So religious affiliation, absolutely. We want to take it a step further than that as well. So we know that it isn't just federal law enforcement that is engaged in the fascism that we see going on. We know that states that on the other side of the spectrum of California, it's a race to the bottom to see who can be more fascist faster. Texas and Florida leading the way. And the small, weak men who run those states competing with one another to see who can outdo the other one in terms of cruelty and obedience to their master, Donald Trump. And in doing so, they're enlisting local law enforcement in the effort to try to enforce federal laws. There's some egregious examples of how they're the state is imposing its will on local law enforcement in those states. We also know that they don't want to stop within the borders of their states. They want to go outside of their state's borders to enforce their unjust, and I would say unconstitutional laws. And so we're going to make sure that the rules that we establish in the city of San Diego apply not just to federal law enforcement agents, but to out-of-state law enforcement agents as well. But if you now have a warrant, and if you are a federal law enforcement agent, or you are an out-of-state law enforcement agent, or if you are a private agent that has been hired by the Trump administration or an out-of-state law enforcement agent, you are not welcome on non-public city property without a warrant. And the last thing that we're going to do with this ordinance, which I think will probably be the most controversial, to be honest, but I think it's well worth doing. It's not good enough for us simply not to cause harm. We cannot be complicit in causing harm either. And we need to be more thoughtful about where our public dollars are going. And so what I'm going to propose is that every contract the city enters into, every lease we sign, and every grant that we provide to someone requires that those folks doing business with the city, benefiting from the city's funds, also put those judicial warrant requirements in place. And so what we will see is if we can do this at a regional level, and Chair Lawson Weaver will be with us on Friday, is an ecosystem bill. Not for any other purpose, but to ensure that the rule of law and due process and safety actually take precedent, or actually are required throughout this region. And so I'm excited to bring that forward. I know it's going to be a huge fight, and we're going to need you all to show up and support that and tell the fascists, not here, not in San Diego.
I'm going to ask you some more details about how we can show up and save GTFO and help get this passed in a second. But everybody, I want to, ladies and gentlemen, they and them, I want to welcome Supervisor Monica Montgomery Scott. So you guys are going to be sharing the microphone. So we've been talking a little bit about some of a new ordinance that you're talking about passing to protect not just undocumented people, but everyone that the Trump administration is coming after. But first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. I know you were working up to the last minute before you got here. My name is Allison. It's wonderful to meet you. We've been talking a little bit about community and the importance of community. Can you introduce yourself? Tell everybody who you are, and let us know what you're working on.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for your patience coming over from the county building. It's good to see you. And thanks for the invitation. I'm Monica Montgomery Scott, now serving as Vice Chair of the Board of Supervisors. Also the first African American woman to hold a seat in San Diego. And I think that means a lot in the sense that when I talk about that achievement, I come to the office as myself. So as you can see, I have big hoops, I have sister locks, and I'm very proud of who I am. And I think that often give space for those around me to also be proud of who they are, and we can relate in that way. So I'm a third generation San Diegan. My grandmother raised 4 kids as a single mother. She lived originally from Mississippi, moved here to San Diego, and lived in what used to be Bay Vista Apartments. It's now Seabreeze Apartments. It was one of the first low-income apartment complexes in the city of San Diego. That's where she raised her 4 kids. They're all pretty successful, thankfully, very much grounded in faith, but also in service. And so those traditions were carried throughout our family generations. My grandmother was the youngest of 13 that came here from Mississippi, and my father is from Texas. So the family has some southern roots, but I'm certainly a Cali girl. I was born and raised here. I went to Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. That was a historically black college university. Learned a lot about the civil rights movement there. You could actually touch and feel and see where people actually were, where they marched, where they, protested. And that really helped to shape me in the way that I see our country, right? The way that I believe in our country, but also the struggles that we have had and continue to have. So I'm rooted in that history, but also just this desire that I have that everyone should have an opportunity. Everyone should have dignity and respect, and we should all treat each other in that way. And so my policies that I bring forward are rooted in that. And of course they have to get through bureaucracy, they have to get through the political, I won't say games, but I will say the political field, the political nature of what we do. But my policies are deeply rooted in the fact that I want people to have a choice about the life that they want to live, to have a good quality of life, and to be treated with dignity and respect amongst one another. No matter how we look, no matter what our income, no matter what our gender, no matter how we identify, that's what my desire is. So.
Awesome, thank you. We've had folks that are here tonight write down questions, so I have gone through these. I'm not censoring anything. I just want you to know I haven't read the questions in advance because I think it's so important that we address the questions that a lot of the folks have here. And some of this we've answered in our discussion up to this point, but there are some expanding questions on them. So for example, how are the county and the city partnering to push back against the abuses of this administration? And I think with talking about this new ordinance that you're going to unveil touches on that. But the follow-up to that is, are there resources for people on rights under our First Amendment? What are our resources?
So partnership. So let me just go back a second and talk about the functions of the county and how we're impacted by the decisions of this administration. So the county is charged and mandated by the state and the federal government to administer programs, entitlement programs for our most vulnerable communities. So Medicaid, we call it Medi-Cal, SNAP, we call it CalFresh, programs, HUD and housing. Those are all housed at the County of San Diego. And how we are funded for those is the feds give state money, and the state gives the 58 counties the money, right? In order to administer those programs, because they're originally, they are state programs, but there is a realignment bill that forces the county then to administer those programs. So when we're talking about HR 1, right, where funding there's the tax cut for the rich at the expense of poor people. And we're beginning to see the impacts of that, even though all of the cuts have not been made. But we are going to be short hundreds of millions of dollars at the county based on those cuts. So that's what we're facing right now. We, the chair and Chair Lawson Reamer and I just brought forward a board letter that's our measure or agenda item at the county that opens up our reserves because at the county of San Diego we have about $2 billion in the bank right now. That is in reserves, not our budget. Our budget is about 8.5 billion, but we have the 2 billion in reserves. And we've been very conservative over the years, but especially right now, you know, we always say there's a rainy day fund, you know, well, it's pouring, right? It's pouring. Our partners in labor, they came with their raincoats one day. It is pouring. And so we needed to reevaluate that policy so that we can begin to supplement some of what the feds are taking away from us. So that's one example, like that's the main function of the county. The Health and Human Services and then the jails, probation, sheriff, you know, those are the two main things, and there's a lot of departments under there. So partnership is extremely important, and we're, this is my buddy, we partner well, but we don't have, at the city we have some that don't really care to partner, but partnerships require reciprocity, and we have to get to the point where we get past some of the initiatives that you all see on the news, and we actually sit together and do the work and figure it out. And homelessness, I think, is in one of those areas where we are, the behavioral health plan, we have that responsibility, but the cities have land use jurisdiction over what goes on in their boundary, right? And so we have a lot of work to do, so I think work together on those things. I thought of having, you know, memorandums of understanding between the city and county where we can kind of work out some of those details. What will the county be doing? What will the city be doing? And so we've been able to work together quite well. And I'll just leave it at that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just really quickly to add on. I had the privilege of serving with the supervisor when she was a council member. We had a chance to get to know each other before that, and and we didn't win every fight that we took on, but we took on some really, I think, important ones together. And I'd say probably I think we lost some of the most important ones that we took on, but we did that without blinking, and I think we don't regret the positions we took and the votes we made. And I think having done that together, like it's just super important to have people you can trust in this work. And I know where Supervisor Montgomery's step is coming from, and that is what she told you about why she is doing the work that she does and what she's prioritizing. That is 100% real, and it's always been 100% real. I want to make sure, Allison, that the question about First Amendment resources, I almost want to ask a follow-up, but what do we mean by that? Does that mean like protections for people who are exercising their rights, knowing how far they can go before they're kind of crop dancing outside of what's protected? What do we mean by that?
I don't want to speak on behalf of anybody, but from what I understand from when I get out of it is if we're going to hold ICE accountable, fight back, come and show up in our neighborhoods when these things happen, are we protected by the First Amendment? What are we protected to do, and what are we not protected to do, I guess. It's kind of, I don't know who answered that question. I don't know if you want to clarify or not. Is that yes? That's a yes.
Yeah. We were in the exact, I think, in total agreement about this. We need to be honest with each other. So the ordinance that we're going to bring forward, we're going to do our absolute best to give, this is the way we say it, to give people the firmest ground possible to assert their rights. And they don't give a shit about your rights. So we have, like, you can't engage right now without being honest with yourself about that. They are lawless. And they showed that in the first minutes of this regime. in the most explicit, two middle fingers up way you could possibly imagine. He pardoned people who engaged in an insurrection. So that tells you everything you need to know about the commitment to law and order from this administration. They don't care about the Constitution. And the Supreme Court has no problem changing the interpretation of the Constitution to meet the goals of the Trump administration. So, we need to have an army of lawyers. We need to be thoughtful about creating the conditions to assert the rights that we know exist and should exist. And we cannot dilute ourselves into thinking that that acts as a force field against mass terrorist agents or fascism, because it doesn't. That's not how this works. And we have to be clear about that, because if we're not, we're going to be playing a different game than they're playing. So you probably wanted a more optimistic answer to that. I'm sorry. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
You know, we are challenged right now to hold on to the idea of America that we want. I think that's still important. But while we do that, we have to be grounded in this reality. This is, right now, I think, I'll just speak, you know, I'll use Sean's family as an example. Maybe when Sean was his son's age, he maybe was growing into an era where he had more rights, right, than he may have. That's where we are right now. And we do have to understand that in this fight, we have to fortify ourselves with the appropriate armor based on that fight, not on a fight that is more familiar to us, maybe even the last time Trump was elected, right? That was a different fight than what we're facing now. And so I'm concerned that we're kind of still lulled in this, that we don't understand how fast it's slipping away sometimes. You know, and listen, I say it, but I still believe in this country, and I think that I am, if you have not heard the term, I am a descendant of enslaved people, right? I'm not an immigrant, right? And so my folks have been through since this country, the idea of America was founded while my people were enslaved. And I still believe in this country. But those are the types of things we have to face. This is our history. Why I am not surprised by the behavior of ICE agents. Why? Because slave owners of enslaved people ripped children away from their parents and made them work a field. So it does not surprise me what is going on right now. And that's really where we have to look back. We have to take a not so popular analysis of our history, and that's when we will start to change things together. Resistance is extremely, extremely important. Gathering here, being organized, having presence against this dictatorship. But I think we're even stronger when we understand the history, that this is actually America. And this has been America for a lot of people that have not walked around with various types of privileges. I feel it's a privilege to be in office. That's a privileged place to be, right? But we have to be real about that. And that helps us to understand how to fight, because we can get over this. I cannot believe they're doing this. Believe it. Believe it. We go back. I used to go into high schools on, I think it was Constitution Week. I did this when I worked with ACLU. And one of the first things that we would teach about the Constitution, you know, the Constitution wasn't originally, it wasn't written for everybody. It was written for white male landowners. That's it. And so what does Project 2025 do? Take it back to where white male landowners have everything. And everybody else is an enslaved person. So this is America. And until we get it right, we'll keep revisiting this in our history like in a different way.
And when you talk about the fight, and you know, with the fights you've engaged in together, or you know, for the county and the city, I know that a lot of people I've spoken to and who writing to me have always said, we don't care whether you win or lose, we just really need everyone to fight for us right now. And so I think I speak for a lot of people when I say we appreciate the fight. So thank you. This is a question, it says, this is about the SDPD. Help us understand whether SDPD is supposed to be armed and observe or to protect and serve. And then it says, P.S. please forward this to Todd, thank you.
I appreciate that question.
You're welcome, Sean.
So it's a really, really important question, and I've tried to maintain an open line of communication with the chief about this. Because we've seen multiple incidents now where San Diego Police Department has shown up while abuse is occurring, while residents of San Diego are the ones being abused, and it doesn't feel or look like San Diego PD is protecting San Diegans. And I talked to the chief about this, and there was a few things that I asked for. I said, first and foremost, if the people who are the aggressors and presenting themselves as enforcement officers have not identified themselves, I think SDPD has a responsibility, has a duty to demand identification. And it's one of the reasons why the mass and the lack of identification is so scary. They've opened the door for any maniac to kidnap you. And there are people who are really, really endangered by that. And SDPD is there. I think they have a duty to say, hold up, who are you? Who are you from? With what authority are you acting under to do what you are doing right now? And prove it. But here's where that gets tricky, and again, just being honest with ourselves about the situation that we're in. Let's say they do prove it, and they are a federal enforcement agent. What does SDPD do now? And maybe a warrant, depending on what they're there for, that may not be required in the moment. Or even if it is, how are they going to enforce that requirement? And what the chief has told me is he's made it clear that they will not be called to sit on standby while raids are happening. They've said we will not do that, and I appreciate that commitment. However, that does not mean that they won't show up to a scene when a raid is happening. But again, we need to be honest with ourselves about how much we can actually prevent that from happening. Law enforcement officers know how to get law enforcement officers to respond to a call. And so when we tell ourselves, well, they just shouldn't go. Sure, but there's nothing requiring the person calling to say who they're with. What if they just call and say there's an emergency, I'm being assaulted? So what I'm getting at is SDPD is likely to show up to some of these situations. And what we can do is demand that when they show up, certain protocols are followed. So then I asked the chief, because he said, at that point, we are just there to show up and keep the peace. And I said, hold up. I said, hold up, chief. I said, I think you mean that. I actually think that in that moment he meant what he was saying. And I don't expect you to, but I think I'm going to take him at face value because there was no value in not accepting it. What I said was, the reality is, chief, I said, let me play out a scenario for you. There's 5 protesters at the scene, and they are just holding up signs that say, out with the fascists. No more ICE. Not saying a word, just holding up signs. And those ICE agents decide, we don't like those signs. We're going to beat the shit out of you for holding those signs up. Are your officers prepared to keep the peace? And I don't think they are. I don't think that they feel like they have the authority to do that, given the supremacy clause of the Constitution. And until that flips, we have to, again, be honest with ourselves about the situation that we're living in. Just the last thing I'll add, I also asked the chief to commit to this, is that when someone is disappeared or detained by an agent, and their family members or loved ones, friends don't know where they are, I think that SDPD has a responsibility to help folks find where people are. And that doesn't seem like too much to ask for. It's certainly not a violation of the Constitution. And I said, regardless of why I said DHS or whoever has done the apprehension, regardless of why they say they were taken, the end result is the same for the people who love that person who's gone. And that is, someone they love is gone. They don't know where they are, and they are very scared. And if we're protecting and serving, we should serve that family and helping identify where that person is and how to get them out. So that's what we've asked for. We're supposed to receive something in writing. We've been waiting on now for several weeks, and to be honest, longer than I was told we would be waiting for. And we're saying we need to have it because the public needs to see it. Because once it's in writing and you all can see it, people can be held accountable to it. So that's what we're asking for. That's what we've asked for. That's what we're expecting. And I hope that folks will help us hold SDPD accountable at a minimum for the commitments that they will be making on paper. Monica, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that, or from the sheriff department perspective.
Well, I think, first of all, I'm definitely, and maybe you will join me, I'm going to be calling the chief and asking him to really look at that proposal and make those same suggestions. I'm personally going to commit to do that.
And I think on that point, the chief has a boss, and that's the mayor.
That part.
And that's what, so that, and I mentioned that because that's the difference between the way the city of San Diego is structured as opposed to the county. The sheriff is elected. We can make suggestions, but the Department of Justice, the Attorney General is really not even her boss because she's still elected, but that's the kind of the governing body in the state can put in the penal code what she should do, right? So that is the difference. So I would say, please call the chief and call the mayor. Because that, you know, there is, there's a hierarchy there. So yeah, I would just add that.
Can we do one more thing on policing? Yeah, absolutely. And then I got a couple of, we got about 20 minutes. I don't want to keep anybody up past.
Just the last thing I want to mention is, during the budget conversation, a very important conversation was was brought back to the surface around the use of surveillance technologies. Surveillance technologies that are supposed to allow for, as a force multiplier, that's the term they like to use. And a couple years ago, Monica and I were duking it out about the use of these technologies, not with each other, but with basically everybody else on the council and the mayor. And it wasn't that we didn't see, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think we both acknowledge, we see the potential value of, obviously, like this technology will make it easier to do certain things. Tracking a license plate across the city will obviously make it easier to arrest people who committed a crime. We're not done. We know that that will help. Cameras everywhere would help track people. The question is, do we want people tracked like that? People who are not committing crimes. And we lost that argument. We lost that argument again in the January of last year. And I was like so missing my friend. She had just gone to the county, was serving up for the county board. And we had a proposal was brought forward to amend the surveillance ordinance that Monica had helped champion and bring forward. And a hole was basically blown into the surveillance ordinance, allowing for an exemption to the entire policy when SDPD is working on a task force with federal law enforcement. That is huge, and that gasp that we're hearing now, we needed then. Because the pretext of keeping you safe is now what is allowing SDPD to go into a closed room with on a joint task force with federal law enforcement and share data collected. And when I asked the chief, what is the burden of proof for a federal enforcement agent to show that they're actually, because I'll tell you exactly what they're going to say. We're trying to protect people from child trafficking. Of course we want to protect people from child trafficking. No one wants a child trafficking. But are we requiring that the federal law enforcement officer in that room to actually show that that's what they're after? Or do they not like that you showed up to the No Kings rally and they're saying, you know, Allison's looking pretty suspicious these days.
I traffic cats.
Yeah. And is that used as a pretext to know exactly where you are and how you're moving about the city?
So we still have cats and then children and yeah.
So that conversation, we were able to put a hold on the allocation of that funding in this year's budget. So essentially not refunding it until the council has reconsidered that policy. But if the idea of the Trump administration being able to watch everywhere that you go in this city, if you do not like that, there will be a time coming soon at City Council where we need you to show up and say, are you out of your minds? We cannot trust them with that information. San Diego has been, was, will continue to be the safest big city in this country. We do not need to sacrifice our freedom and our privacy in the name of safety that we will not have through the use of this technology. Sorry.
No, thank you. I'm writing these down, public comment on my list of things to do on surveillance. All right, couple of nuts and bolts questions from some community members. You were talking about the ordinance that you worked on to prevent landlords from using AI to price gouge folks. This is along the similar lines, and I have this question too, because in my neighborhood, both houses on the left of me are now Airbnbs, and the house on the right, it was swooped up in a cash offer by a corporate private equity group. Is there anything that you're working on, or what can we do to talk about limiting how many properties these major corporations and private equity funds can purchase and just buy up?
So, a couple parts to that answer. We are working on something right now to address. So one, let's step back. So why does this happen? It's because people see housing not as a human right, or as a foundation for stability and a dignified life and health, but as a commodity. That's a problem. And that is a structural problem in this country, and if you don't like that, which was just described there, and I don't like it either, then we need to name the root of the issue, and that is that we would allow housing to essentially become a commodity. And we need to ensure that there is publicly owned and publicly available, detached from profit housing that people have access to. So that's a longer term project. But I'm telling you, I know who's in this room, we need you engaged in that fight. Some of you are. But that's going to be, look, I'm going to be honest about what that means. That means local dedicated revenue in order to pay for that publicly owned housing. Because if the housing's going to come from somewhere, and right now the city of San Diego just established a fund to preserve affordable housing so that we can start to buy housing. So if there's an apartment building in your neighborhood that's a little bit older, looking a little worse for wear, instead of that being seen by a private equity firm as a profit opportunity, before they can get their greedy hands on it, the San Diego Housing Commission can come in and acquire that property first, rehab it so that it's dignified housing, but protect it from being turned into just another profit source for a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm. We're also, and I can't say too much about it tonight, but I promise you it's coming soon. We've got a plan to address the hoarding of housing for short-term vacation rentals and wealthy individuals and corporations who own homes that they are not using here in San Diego. So we want to start there, and then that second piece we talk about, we'll get to that.
Thank you.
I'll just add real quick, this, one of the first questions was about city-county partnership. So we do have a partnership where the county will provide land for affordable housing, where we've been able to partner with the city quite a bit. I think we have about 11 properties in the pipeline, and we've completed about five of those projects. So I certainly, this is a huge part of it, your example of Airbnbs. But there's also, I think this is just, the reality is there's also a lot of resistance, right, in our communities when building is to occur in some of our communities, right? So we do have to think about that in the grand scheme of things. If we are talking about everyone having opportunity, dignity, respect, and the crux of that and the center of that is having housing, having a place to call home. And so, yes, that having housing that folks can actually afford, right, to live in and not be cost burdened by, rent being more than 30% of what they're bringing in. So I just want to mention that because here's where I try to continue to focus, in addition to reacting to what the Trump administration is doing, focusing on issues that I've always focused on, right? Because I see them all working holistically. And one of the hardest fights is housing. This is one of the hardest fights in our communities. And I want us to be clear that all of these things are very interconnected, and we need to at least be able to come to the table with regard to housing in our communities with an open mind. Great to ask questions. Also, understand if we all don't like every single development, but there is a responsibility not just to react and respond based on, Trump, but if we are going, again, if we're not going to come back to this loop in 50 years, then we need to do something different now. And housing is at the very center of those conversations.
And you all know how Trump made his money.
Slumlord. Just kicking people out, not letting people in. He's definitely got a bit of a history there. All right, this is a quick one. Maybe, maybe not. Not happy with SB 79. There's been no opportunity for community input. Why not?
So we're talking about state senate bills?
Yeah.
I think, like, no, not to throw our state senator under the bus, but the same bill, I would talk to state legislators about that, so we should think that's okay.
So you can't open the comment section for SB 79, right? Got it.
Good with that one.
It would, yeah, it'd be weird. This is interesting. What's your position on Democrats in Congress? Again, not you. But what do you think about a potential government shutdown with the continuing resolution that's expiring the end of this month, I believe?
Well, they got to do better. They've got to do better. I think I am a Democrat. I've been a Democrat since I could register to vote, and I've never been more disappointed in party leadership, more frustrated with the lack of vision, more discouraged by the lack of backbone than I've been recently. So it's got to get a lot better, and it's got to get a lot better fast. But again, I think the local action matters. I think there's work that we can do, and when you show up and you support that, and you show that it's popular, if you agree with Allison that fighting is the thing that you can, the only thing I would say is that we gotta win too.
Oh, I'm not saying.
No, I know. But you have to, if we show up and fight, and you show appreciation for that, I will tell you, other politicians will notice that you like that, and expect that, and demand that, and that is, they are responsive to that incentive structure. The shutdown, all I know is it can't go like last time. So that I will just say that it's got to be a lot better than that, and they need to think very, very, very carefully before they give Trump the authority to run this government. They better get something very, very good in return.
Here's something local for you. Everybody loves small business. We all support our small businesses, but how do we get them to support their employees better with health care, vacation pay, paid holidays, and things like that?
So, I'm a daughter of small business owners, and so I definitely understand the struggle. It does get harder and harder in California to keep doors open for small businesses, and sometimes the employees, feel the brunt of that, including along with the owners. What I've done at the county level is we are establishing a program now that would provide additional capital to small businesses. And of course that would come with some conditions, but I think that's extremely, and some of those conditions would be providing an appropriate wage and benefits and all of those things. But I think it's very, very important for us to, as government, to invest in small businesses, because a lot of our folks are employed by small business. And I think it creates a better community feel. Basically, we're talking about a lot of corporations taking over communities. I know there's opposition to some big box stores. I'm boycotting a few right now, but I think the counties, we put out over $1 billion a year in awards, right? That's for nonprofits. And some other companies, but I think we need to really support small businesses in a way that matters.
Just very, very quickly, I'll do a plug for an organization, Business for Good. Business for Good is a nonprofit that consists, it's a membership organization that consists of progressive business organizations that are committed to doing right by their employees and advocating for other companies to do the same. they are, so I would take a look at which companies are members of Business for Good and support those and talk, use your dollars as a way of supporting businesses that are doing right. We certainly have a responsibility in government to require that those who are benefiting from public dollars are doing right by their employees. The last thing I'll say about Business for Good is they've shown up in the room in this minimum wage fight and been the counterbalance to the Chamber of Commerce and those who are representing big business. They've shown up and said, actually, as a small business owner who runs a restaurant or a bar, it is good for the people in my community to earn enough to come eat in my restaurant or to grab a beer after work and to not barely be getting by. And if I, as a small business, can do right by my employees, you certainly, multi-billion-dollar global corporation, can do right by yours.
We just have a couple minutes left. This one is specifically for you, Sean. As council president, you wanted to end virtual public comment at meetings. What about also setting time limits on council members and staff presentations that go on and on?
Yeah, so there are rules on council member comments. We're limited to 5 minutes. You can ask for additional 3. After that, you have to have time shared from another council member. So those rules are on the books. I did my absolute best to enforce those, and sometimes made some of my colleagues very angry when I did. The staff presentation piece, there isn't a hard and fast rule on the books, but we actually, like when I was council president, we would have conversations. At the same time, for complex items, you want to make sure that you're not selling the council and the public short of an opportunity to hear that. So understood that, trust me, sometimes we're like, did you really need to say all that? But it's a balancing act.
Got it. And then one final question, and I wish I could have gotten to every single one of these. I really did my best, and I hope you will forgive me for not being able to get to all of them. This one is asking if San Diego County or city is participating in the proposed health alliance with other states like Oregon and Washington or other cities in the state. How can we assure vaccine access?
That is a good question. I do not know if we are participating, but we've had a few changes within our public health department. We had Dr. Wilma Wooten, who you all remember was at the front lines, and back in 2020, with regard to making sure that folks were vaccinated, specifically in our underrepresented communities where we saw that the numbers were a lot lower. I was at the city at the time and helped with a lot of those efforts to have public vaccination. So as we see what is before us with RFK, the county has been at the forefront of that specific public health issue, and so we will continue to be.
Anything you want to add?
That's primarily
Ditto.
Yeah. Well, that's the county's, work, and I'm glad that Monica's there and not a maniac who doesn't believe in science.
Yeah. I want to thank you both for coming, taking people's questions. I wish I could have gotten to more of them. We are going to mingle, we're going to hang out, and I just want to point out that everyone can talk to Adriana Cortez Luna about the Working Families Party back there. I also want to encourage everybody that there are things we can do. I've written down a couple for myself. I'm going to call the mayor, I'm going to call the chief, and I'm going to talk about the surveillance. I also want to do the public comment on the surveillance issue that's coming up. Those are a couple of things we could do. Something else you can do, there's an sdtownhall.com website. It's kind of like our practical magic phone tree. You can go there, you can take the survey, and I just want to thank everybody again for coming tonight. I'll give you guys a minute to close, have a closing remark. But I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for inviting me, and thanks to Marakai and the Buona Forchetta family of restaurants and venues. This is an incredible venue, and I appreciate them having us here tonight. And that is basically it. I'm so heartened by the attendance tonight and to see everybody and to be able to speak and ask questions of elected representatives and to have this conversation, because community is so important. And like Jelani Cobb said, Professor Cobb said, most basic fundamental civic unit in our nation is neighbor. And we need to be here for each other and for our elected representatives to support them just as they support us. So thank you all for joining us tonight.
I think that was a good close. Thank you for the invitation to speak to you all. It really is an honor to serve in this capacity. It is very tough right now, and I know that there aren't a lot of bright spots, especially right now, when it comes to Democratic leadership, but I can tell you that at the county, you have 3 very powerful women that are really looking at these different ways of county. In the past month, we've put probably about 10 proposals forward that have not been traditional. We are taking OC spray out of the juvenile detention centers. We are giving our Citizens Review Board expanded authority to look at the healthcare workers and in custody deaths. We are changing our reserve policy. We're fighting against climate change. We are doing so many things. And we're getting punished for it. We're being punished for it. But we're moving, and you are inspiring us to keep our inside-outside game going. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Well, first, really quickly, to some of the things that Monica just mentioned and listed, those have been decades in the making. And it's just, so when we talked earlier about the importance of winning power, this is why. Because by putting the right people in power, good things are happening. And we know that the opposite is true as well. And so thank you for using that power in the way that you have. The last thing I will say is we talked about protecting and not resisting. And the other thing that I'd like to add to that is making sure that we're thinking about progress as well. For many, many, many people, the world was not good enough at the first day of Trump 1.0 or the first day of Trump 2.0. So it is not good enough to just resist. We have to move forward. And we have to talk about what that looks like in a very real way. About people having the housing that they need, earning enough to have a dignified life, being healthy and happy, and our kids going to great schools, and childcare not breaking the backs of families who have to pay for it. We have to name those things, because that is what helps draw more people in. We will have a certain number of people who are willing to show up because they see and are appalled by and repulsed by what Trump is doing. But we are limiting ourselves in our ability to win if we're not talking about what we were actually fighting for. And so I encourage you all to talk about that as well with each other. It starts with dreaming with your neighbors, with your family members. But wouldn't it be nice if? And that is what we are working to win power to create. It is not just what we are working to create, to build power to protect against. There's a world that we're trying to build, and we have to talk about that. And so I want to encourage you all to do that. The Working Families Party, thank you thank you to them for being here. Thank you for plugging them. They are helping provide an outlet for Dems or people who are affiliated with any parties to fight harder, to win power, and we should support them. I'm a member, Monica's a member, and we need to support them. But please, please, please talk about that world that we are trying to create, because that is the best way to win.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilman.